Welcome back. SkinClub have, of course, given us this unique opportunity to manage our Counter-Strike portfolios, and it's been a month, so the changes obviously match the values. We went from 0 to the points we're now on. It was an interesting month. Some small events having surprisingly big impact, and some huge events, of course, netting out big dividends. Yumi, you've taken 44 points away from this first month of stock management. I think a pretty decent run. Obviously, a lot of that has come from your Vitality pick.
Yeah.
We both had Vitality as obvious choices, and yeah, they netted us 2 basically big event worth of dividends. 1 big event, 1 prestige event, totals 40, and then the rest came down to a lot of little changes in ranking. You gained a few points. I think it was a good pick, picking Furia. I actually shorted that stock and lost 8 points on it. That was an interesting gamble that has really paid off. That Furia team look, well, actually a lot stronger than we initially expected.
Just definitely my perspective on them being an undervalued, underrated team. I think people just got, and I've said this, I've been vocal about this as such, but I think people have just got so used to hating Furia, the organization, they failed to see the forest for the trees, because they've planted some pretty good trees in Yekindar and Molodoy, who have both just been able to actually elevate the roster quite quickly.
They have, and I think for a lot of us, it's not so much. For me, I thought the risk was big, not so much because I was used to hating Furia necessarily, but also because I'm so used to being disappointed by Yekindar, right? I'm just so used to that not working out. And then the Molodoy thing, you know, I was one of the people who was the most familiar with his game. It didn't feel tier 1 ready. Felt like that could have some meshing issues. And of course, they've papered over that problem pretty well by essentially setting him up to just play off his own field, play off his abilities, and not so much have to worry about a lot of cohesive team play.
That was the one unknown, is that when we discussed them before and when we've talked together, it was whether or not they actually started to restrict Molodoy and change his play style to be more under the familiar Fallen style, so to speak. But yeah, the fact that they're allowing him to kind of call a lot of his own plays does mean that the rest of the squad can, I guess, revolve around the more strategic side, or they just work off of what Molodoy finds.
Yeah. That's been very successful for them, and you know, I mean, we'll see if it keeps going. You've decided to hold on to them, but I think one of the things we have to discuss from last week is a stock that massively paid off. Massively paid off. I think it was a tricky pick. There
we go.
It was a bit of a gamble, but I've decided I'm going to start off the show with this team just because I am holding them going into this next month, almost as a thank you. Not so much that Tricked are necessarily going to keep putting up these kinds of numbers. They've flown up near 20 points in VRS since the last time we looked at these teams. They've won 2 small lands, very small lands, but at 10 points a pop, that's always worth it. Omen retaken, the Comic-Con Baltic Finals, of course, iconic events that you can't miss. You just can't miss. But yeah, really paid out. And they have since then actually also made a change. I think they signed Croc off the HLTV Academy. I'm not sure that happened prior to this episode. I think they were still playing
22 days ago, so I'd assume.
Yeah, they were still playing with their prior rifler.
Yeah,
Queenix, that was it. It was a big upgrade in my eyes because Croc, as far as a talent, you know, should be pretty good. I mean, so far he's played 4 maps in those 22 days, so it's not exactly been a long time, a large sample. But what they managed to do with Queenix was what got me these points. So I'm going to hold on to them. I'm going to assume they're going to keep playing well with Croc now added. It'll be a while before they actually play another game. They just went out at Glitch Masters, haven't got anything listed coming up. But I think they're worth holding, at least for now, just to see where this next season takes them.
Yeah, I mean, this is where you got most of the point differential between my score and your score, because you said mine 44. You know, again, I would agree it's pretty good. But you didn't mention yours. 78 is what you have. Yeah. And 19 of which comes from...
39.
Was it 19? 39 of it.
39 of it comes from this one team. I really, you know, my Furia short kind of screwed me. It was the biggest, like, VRS change that was amongst the top sort of teams, the more recognizable names. Yeah, I really took a big L on that one, but still, the W from the 39 trick points is carrying me today. It really is. I mean, Vitality felt like a given. You know, we both picked some backup choices to like kind of cover our bases in case the major went the wrong way. We almost went the complete wrong way because neither one of us picked Mal's, but still, that was the anticipation that was required given the events coming up. But Tricked, yeah, outstanding. Love to see it. Love to see it. I mean, there were some risks. You pointed this out, that they didn't necessarily have a guaranteed win at the lands they played. I mean, sure, Comic-Con, that event they should have, they're playing Forever Mention E with 5 players none of us have ever heard of.
Yep.
But
Yep.
they had to play a best of 5 against Bad News Eagles to win the Omen Retake Finals. That's not a given. Given especially historically how Bad News Eagles have performed, and that was a close series. If no one, I'm assuming not that many people watched it, but 2 of the 3 maps that they win 3-0. 2 of those 3 are in OT, 1 goes all 24 rounds. It was this close. It was this close between those 2 sides. But a huge performance from Nodios carried them over the line, and yeah, that event by itself, I think, accounted for not only the dividend payout, but also a huge surge in placement points. Yeah, they got plus 21 ranking points off that. They actually would have been an even better pick for me if they hadn't bombed the glitched Masters and come back down. They were up near enough rank 50 in the world prior to that defeat, or prior to that disappointment. So yeah, Tricked, yeah, really pulled it off.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can understand your loyalty to them, but also, I can only hope that holding them here again will only come back to bite you. That's as much as I can hope for, because it's a penny stock. It's supposed to be turbulent, and I'm kind of hoping that, maybe not hoping, but I'm anticipating that there's still going to be a lot of turbulence ahead for them. You know, you're seeing the highs now, but maybe you should cut your losses before it starts to descend.
Maybe, but look, I found some other penny stocks to buy. Of course, I will. I'm always going to be min-maxing as much as I can in this sort of event. But the Alliance loss is probably the one that scares me the most. Because at Glitch Masters, they end up getting battered on their nuke pick by Alliance. And you're like, oof, you couldn't win a map pick over Alliance? Jeez, this is getting...
Yeah.
Maybe you were distracted, new player coming in, you just had those big lands, you're back to online play. Maybe that's a bit of an overlooked event, but damn, that's not a promising result, is it?
I think the sad part for me is just that I don't actually think I know enough about this team to have shared the vision, or to have, like, even after the amount of growth they've had in their VRS and the dividend payout from the last episode, I still haven't been able to see enough of their gameplay. I've maybe watched like one map, and I just don't see enough there for me to buy in. Even if I think that there could be good yields here, it's too risky a venture, I think, for me.
Yeah, well, I'm liking the fact that when they come back from the breaks, I think they're taking most, if not all, of the summer break off. They're not really playing a whole lot. They're probably going to be playing some very low-level tournaments, but they're going to get good invites for, because they're going to be ranked 59th. They might get, a very low-level event playoff invite. They could get some other invites direct to groups. They don't have to suffer through some of the online qualifiers these tournaments hold. I think there's still some opportunity there, but I will agree with the general sentiment that maybe this was worth cutting before things got too shaky. All right, let's talk about a team that obviously is the talk of the town right now. They just won the major. We're both holding them. I think it's worth at least addressing them. Vitality, they're currently number 1 in the world. They were number 1 in the world when we picked them. There's not really much to say about this team in terms of things that can go wrong, right? They feel like the most solid pick there ever has been. There's no chance they're changing roster, especially. And assuming they accept the invite for Fisher, they'll be heavy favorites going into that event. Is there any doubt in your mind, Yubi? I mean, do you think there's a chance that someone can upset them at that event? And if it does, do you think it matters?
I mean, from what we've seen so far, the only real challengers that they could have are Falcons, Mouse, Spirit. And they beat Mouse on their road through the major. They didn't have to play Spirit. They didn't have to play Falcons. And, Falcons are a team we'll touch on later, but there are changes ahead for some of these other teams. Whether or not Spirit makes some changes during this player break is still unknown. Whether or not Na'Vi make changes, because they're also another team that definitely, if you had to look at the playoff bracket and see the teams that Vitality could have faced, Na'Vi were probably one of the teams you'd actually put it as a team that could upset. Even if they're a team that have massively underperformed, just the way that they game plan and, win on like a lot of push-pull, sliding players into the back lines. They're always a very tricky team. So if they make some good upgrades or changes, then they could also be another threat. But in terms of impending disasters or impending issues, doesn't seem like Vitality really have any at the moment. It's kind of strange to see a team rock up into the major as favorites and still look like the hungriest team there. I think there's been many times where we've looked at like teams like FaZe, for example, or even Spirit, before they won Shanghai. The road up to it didn't look that great for Spirit, and then you could definitely tell that there was a hunger. It's usually the teams that are not winning consistently that sometimes struggle to push it over the line. But yeah, you could tell this Vitality team have like they have very firm objectives in mind, and they seem very driven to reach all of them. Even if ZywOo's not necessarily carrying you in the grand finals, other pieces want it just as bad.
Yeah, the question for Vitality coming to the major was how much of a distraction is their win streak? And, would it matter to them to maintain it? Would they feel extra pressure for it? Then also at the same time, they are the number one team. They are such heavy favorites. Will they be able to, perform with that sort of weight of expectation? And then they delivered. I mean, they lost the win streak immediately in, a classic major fashion, a best of one loss to a team they would never lose to on any other day.
Mm-hmm.
And then went through and, well, they didn't drop a map till the semi. And then the Mongols final. I mean, they lost map 1. Absolutely thrashed them map 2 and 3. Like, that was insane. For me now, the question, okay, it still remains. I mean, we have to ask it. Now what? Now what? Like, do they now take their foot off the gas? Do they now start thinking? I mean, for me, what's been strange is seeing a lot of conversation about how we don't have an era yet. Everyone just crossing their arms. I mean, no. It's only 7 straight event wins and every prestige event in a season. How dare you suggest this is an era? And I'm so confused. So I'm like, so what is it now? Because I've now had comments back-to-back majors only. Like, all right, great. So we're just gonna scratch off. Like,
yeah, we're just gonna keep moving the goalpost effectively, right?
Yeah, exactly. Is that what we're doing? Because for me, this was it. Like, you win the major. You had 6 straight events before it. Then you won the major. You did everything I asked for a team to be era-defining. People are like, oh, it's not long enough. Or what about this team? They won back-to-back majors, and they dominated around it. Won a few events, top 4 everywhere. So it's like, okay, so for the rest of this year, they're top 4 only. Would it become an era at the end of the year? Like, this feels so strange, like, the criteria. What is it for you? Is this for you an era, or is this another one of those too short a time period type things?
I would say it's an era, even before they won the major. I think it's just, if you had to look at this season and they hadn't won this major, it would still just be a black mark on what people would define as an era. Like, I don't think we've seen a team as dominant as this in Counter-Strike Global Offensive to CS2 in terms of every event they rock up to, they win. I mean, maybe Astralis, sure, but they were also skipping a lot of events in a season. Like, they weren't exactly consistently like 2 events in 2 months or 3 events in 2 months playing and winning all those events back to back to back to back. They were actually very good at like staggering out their calendar and not overstressing themselves. And then the events they did show up to, they did either win or they, would make it to a grand finals, for example.
Yeah.
Vitality are winning everything. So I don't think it's unfair to say that this is an era. I understand when people think era, they think longer time periods. But given that the way the Counter-Strike calendar has changed to be like 6 months lead up into major season, that being a close and then there's a gap and then we play the second season, I think it's harder to say that that's realistic. Like, winning a whole season is about as dominant as it gets, especially in the fashion that Vitality have done it.
Yeah, I was just looking back, so I was trying to remind myself of the prime Astralis, the 2018 Astralis, the one that won 10 big events in one calendar year. And I was trying to remember, like, what were the narratives at this time? What were we discussing for Astralis? And we were talking about a couple of things, including, this was prime Astralis, like Nicola Lyholm just making shit up, talking about players couldn't attend certain big events that were very competitive or not Blast because it was travel, and then at the same time traveling halfway around the world just to attend another Blast Pro series with a bunch of BO1s against shitters and then one BO3 against a good team. Like, that was the problem we had with the Astralis back then. Vitality, whilst they have skipped a couple of events this year, they've skipped PGLs that were already inconveniently timed, literally overlapping, and instead have still played the biggest events time and time again. Not just focusing on prize pool, but also playing against the best teams. So I think this Vitality run is unmatched in Go to 2. Like, that sort of range. Even if we include the early NIP days, there are no 4-team events for Vitality. And as much as some 4-team events in Global Offensive Europe early on would be competitive, they'd be like a 4-team, double elim sort of, honestly, kind of slugfest between top 4 sides. Prior to that sort of streak, there were also times where teams were playing these weird biocs that had them invited as top 2 and they had to play a semi and a grand final. Like, there was very different formats at play way back then. For me, this is the most dominant run we've ever seen. Like, between the standards of competition going up, between like the depth of field being so wide, but also so deep, this is literally unthinkable. So I want to call it an era. I don't understand the controversy around that, just because it's purely seemingly based on duration rather than anything else.
Well, it's strange because I think, there's quite a few pundits that would say that Liquid had like a small error for themselves with the way that they...
Yeah, that's what I've argued with. That's one I've argued with, yeah.
Yeah, and if people are going to consider that an error, that was also within a very kind of smallish time frame. I think it was just the manner in which they won a Grand Slam basically from start to finish very rapidly. Yeah. That is the biggest marker for that team, but there's no major. There's other things that discredit it, and part of it is the time schedule, and I understand that. But it becomes harder to make that a core part of the argument. And I think the only way that you compare anything versus the Astralis era is basically we could be at the start of it. Vitality are as dominant as Astralis were towards the middle part of the Astralis era. And actually are more dominant than Astralis during that time period. It's kind of hard to say where we're at in terms of whether or not that continues. I think the only way that you don't make it a case for Vitality having an error this year is if after the player break, they literally bomb out every single event, and it could just be seen as like this weird CS2 anomaly where, yeah, Vitality won everything, but it only lasted 6 months or 5.5 months. But even that, I think, is a bit of a weak case. Like, an error shouldn't be defined purely by length, but just how dominant something is at the time, and whether or not anything can even come close. Because at the moment, for Vitality, it doesn't really seem like there are many.
Yeah, in terms of historic significance as well, that's one thing I always try. Like, the key markers in a year are the prestige events, right? They won both. They won both. There's the 2 that were open to them in their run. They won. It's not like they arrived at the major, did a Liquid, shat the bed, and all of a sudden everything's thrown into doubt. They took care of business. So yeah, that's kind of the Vitality point. We're both still sticking with them, obviously. It'd be ridiculous not to. Why don't we get into one of your more controversial picks? Because you have held on to Falcons and Spirit, as have I. You've held on to Furia, which I think is fair enough overall, and also held on to Astralis, which we might have some time to discuss later. But one of your newer picks, is there anyone, I think, a bit of a deeper pull maybe you've taken?
Well, it depends which one you want me to go for here, because I've got 2 that are a little bit further down the chopping block.
Should we go Spanish?
Yeah, let's go Spanish. I guess I'll start with Iberian Soul. I think we've talked about Iberian Soul a little bit, maybe not on camera before, just kind of discussing the rise that this team has had since reintegrating Alex into a Spanish roster. Because for a while, the core of this old like Movistar project they were rising with Alex. They had some Pius with them. It was all looking pretty good. They had deaths as well on that rise. And now once Alex left to NIP, the roster did kind of spiral. And they had opportunities to have players like Martinez, who was not as good as Sun Pius when he was playing in on Movistar, but then he went to South America and he was doing pretty damn well for himself. And it just felt like the Movistar roster didn't really have any direction. They didn't really know what to do with the pieces that they had. But now that Alex is back, they're suddenly back to winning things and actually getting a lot more output out of pieces like Sossel and Mopoj, who were key driving factors. We can talk about some Pius all we want about, the Movistar rise with him. but imoPOR and Soso imoPOR was as important, and now having a piece like Soso that can also be another sort of bursty, aggressive rifler does allow this team to have like extra depth. So I definitely still have criticisms of this roster and improvements that could be made to key pieces like the AWP, for example. But I think they're playing a very CS2 style of game under Alex, which is, to be honest, is very conducive to the old style he had in Go, where there's a little bit more independent fighting and a little bit more, dual targeting of regions and like the opening 30, 40 seconds. I do like how explosive this team can be, and they're kind of tearing it up in tier 2 at the moment. So I think I just have some faith that they'll continue to rise a little bit more, and Alex will sort of re-justify his worth as an in-game leader.
Yeah, Alex in Spanish is actually, it's one of those conditional players who seems to be just so much better. Now, to be fair, he has spent most of his career under these conditions, and it has been generally of net benefit. That's how you get the most out of him. And give him imoPOR. I don't know what it is, but imoPOR's not the same player without him.
Yeah.
Realistically, back in the Mobstar run, the one that everyone remembers, the one where some Pius is introduced to us, their T-sides are just imoPOR. Like, their Inferno was really strong, and they won their Infernos off the back of that guy going into Banana over and over and over again, challenging CT sides and just taking names. Like, that was how they won maps. Some Pius on T side was chucking flashes. Let's be real. Like, it was nowhere near as important. So I think the system, the way Alex likes to play, and a key piece like imoPOR is far more important for them. We've seen that repeated again here as they team up. The one question, obviously, you brought it up. Got to touch on it a bit. The AWP is a bit of a downgrade to that era. No offense to Stododo. Just not a big fan. Not a big fan of his play. It is a shame they couldn't retain Martinez long enough, at least in terms of this core, keep him in Europe. Because he would have been a pretty solid piece on this team. I think I'd have been more optimistic, and I'd have probably agreed this would be a massive value buy. Now, they are stock on the rise, but I just don't see the big long-term rise continuing. It's a team that's limited. They're trying to get water from stone, and yeah, I'm not sure there's much left in Stododo.
I think what I see as a positive for a lot of the teams that I'm picking outside of like the top 30, for example, is that come October, there are like 4 events all overlapping with each other. And maybe, October is too far away to have that be of influence, and maybe I'll have to hold on to Iberian Soul for a while, but should they maintain their ranking position and, still do well in some of these online competitions, I'm expecting to see small dividend yields or small ranking increases. But then when they get to that sort of 4 event overlapping period in October, that will be a good opportunity to actually gain some higher ranking points against bigger fish, for example, because if all these events are overlapping, there's only so many teams that can play all the events simultaneously. I think only one of them's online, so there's definitely going to have to be some picking and choosing going on for the teams in the VRS.
Yeah, you might get a little bit of an opportunity with this team as well, because they will play local lands. They've done it in the past. Local land play still counts as land play, so there may be some dividend payouts coming from them. Plus, should they do another thing similar to that Galaxy Battle run, that's an online cup win. That's more dividend payout. So yeah, there's some opportunity here prior to that October threshold or deadline, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's just kind of like it's a weird like VRS booster pack. It almost feels like that will be, I imagine, approaching the end of the season where the VRS cutoff should happen for the major. I actually don't know if they've announced when that is. I'll have to look this up, but
okay. I'm not really sure where the calendar stands on that stuff either. Usually a bit of a surprise to me. Oh, this is the cutoff. Okay, cool. The problem we also have then with the major invite stuff is it usually ends up looking pretty silly by the time we get to the major, because there's always an event or two. It always throws the rankings off. So we end up in a very strange spot with the seeding.
So HLTV has it listed as an anticipated October 6th. So that set of events early. Actually may not actually be relevant at all, if that's the case.
Well, that's just the major cutoff. I mean, we'll still be going.
Oh yeah, for sure. But when I'm thinking about importance for teams and relevance to the circuit, make it into the VRS for the major is important, and something
Yeah.
like one of those events actually would serve as a major booster for a lot of teams if it was before the ranking cutoff. I swear it's kind of surprising to see that that's the case though, because if it is as early as that, I swear the MRQs were overlapping the events, and then they cancel the MRQs, and then the cutoff dates before them. It would seem a little strange to me.
Look, not the first time. It won't be the last time that Valve make a general mess of their esports side of things. I've been calling for an esports commission for a long time, so that people, not necessarily like me, but people like us who have that sort of eye on the ball when it comes to how the scene should operate and how things are going to influence different teams and what should matter and what won't matter. Yeah, these sorts of decisions will be taken a little more seriously and probably, end up with a formal, logical structure to the year and the calendar. But yeah, no, of course, Iberian Soul, there is always the opportunity for them to go make moves. We do have the big summer window coming up right now. That's going to influence a lot of teams. That'll come up in our future conversations, and it could come up with this roster, because there still is that opportunity. I'm not saying they're going to go out and just cut Stododo tomorrow, but if the right player comes along over the course of the next sort of month or so, maybe a young talent, maybe a returning player, they can definitely make a move, upgrade, and all of a sudden that looks a lot juicier. A lot juicier. But yeah, there is a team that we have both picked. Mine's even on screen right now, because it's not a hold, it's a switch. I've changed one of my picks around. I had them as a short last month rather, but now I think I'm going to pick them. You've now decided to short them though, and that's G2. They are, an odd team to predict right now. They've had a pretty up and down run all year, including when they had m0NESY and NiKo. Not NiKo, not this year, including when they had m0NESY. But post m0NESY, it's just been kind of bad, but also excusably at times. I feel like, they've had stand-ins, they've had to try and make things work by hook or by crook, and their VRS has taken a hit for it. Now, having heard the rumors of what's going to happen, something's pretty much confirmed. I think this team is going to be pretty good. I think they come back, attend Fisher Masters, and at least either maintain or regain a spot or two on the VRS charts. I think the idea of moving Hunter to IGL especially is appealing to me as a world-renowned Snacks hater as far as the IGL position, but also loving the addition of Saw. Love the idea of bringing in some Pius, and some of the players I've seen rumoured to fill in the Snacks void as far as just literally on the server players. Risky, but at least enticing to me. I mean, I heard they're in the Zway sweepstakes as well. All of these things could be really effective. I think G2 have a good chance of turning it around. You think the collapse continues?
Well, first off, the idea that Zway could be linked to them is kind of like perfecto. Like, there's a lot of talk about Zway, there's a lot of fanfare for him, and it's like, who's gonna pick him up? Or like, it's like a mini Kyosuke circus where everyone's just thinking this is the guy that everyone needs to finish their roster off.
Yeah.
So I actually don't think G2 will have that type of pull. I guess my problem I have with G2 is, what are we actually fixing here? Because if it's CT sides, Hunter's been calling on CT sides, and G2 CT is considerably worse than their T throughout this year. I think it's like a 48% on CT and 53 on T. So if I'm looking at like the raw statistics and just think, who's actually doing their job better as a caller? It is Snacks. Unfortunately, it is Snacks, and this just feels like a firepower move to me for G2, which I understand. I think there's a lot of teams that are angling that direction right now, just because, I mean, you think about what Vitality brings to the table. They've got the brawn and the brain, and right now it feels like the way to break through that is with more brawn. So I don't necessarily dislike the direction the G2 are headed, especially with the idea that Saw and some Pyrus are going to be there. And then you also have, one of these riskier young guns alongside heavy god Malps. Like, there's probably going to be enough talent on the roster. I don't think that's ever really been a problem for G2 historically. I just don't think that Hunter is a good will be a good in-game leader, or will even be serviceable as one, because I mean, one of the major problems I've had with G2 is actually their CT and their like the way they rotate. It just doesn't seem fluid. Everyone's like lingering a little longer than they probably should based on the info on the map, and it doesn't feel very controlled. So I don't expect that Hunter calling on T is going to change that much either. He doesn't strike me as that type of character in the slightest anyway. So I'm a bit more apprehensive. I'm expecting this to go bad, especially when you've got someone like Sampaius who seems to take a little while to actually integrate into rosters. His past 2 roster moves have been a little underperforming for the first 1 to 3 months, and then he starts to figure things out.
Yeah, the part I really believe in clearly is the effect Saw can have on a team. I mean, Saw took that Sangao core basically, made an upgrade of sorts at the AWP position, had to go get a random guy almost, like a guy who was dominating in tier 2, but not a tier 1 player, stick him in and figure everything out. I think the way he turned that around was pretty impressive. Here he's working with stronger pieces in certain positions, more known quantities and more high-level, experienced players in other positions as well, like Hunter. I think this would be an easier turnaround for him. As much as it is a roster that's been on the way down, that struggle with their calling, I think this is the right move for them. The firepower thing is significant as well. This isn't a team who had almost enough firepower. This was a team that needed desperately heavy carrying because they had multiple players who were completely dog shit. Not even in the conversation as serviceable players at a tier 1 level. If Snax wasn't baiting his teammates, he wasn't killing anyone. That was horrifically a part of the problem. On CT side especially, he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And that was something they just couldn't overcome in a lot of rounds. I think G2 have opportunity here to get a lot more out of certain pieces just because they don't have a liability on the roster anymore. That heavy liability that was Snax just isn't there. And another thing that's kind of developing and slowly coming along in response to that CT weakness has been Malbs MD. One of the things he really struggled with was playing a CT side as a star rifler. That's something he'd never really done. Historically, he'd always been this sort of weird hybrid role player where he's a very hard anchor at times on the CT side. And then on T side, the hardest entry. Just throwing himself into the teeth of defenses over and over and over again. He managed to sort of adjust his gameplay a bit. Post Nico, he tried to be Nico, came back around to being himself after a while. But on CT side, he never really got it going. Until more recently, where I think I've seen better positional play from him that previously wasn't there. So I do think that there's more positive signs than just the firepower getting better, but the firepower getting better was half the problem. For me, that was half the problem I was struggling with on this G2 roster.
I just think Heavy God was kind of the best piece on the team, and he'd been there the least amount of time. Unfortunately, he seemed like he had the most autonomy. He would lose you rounds less than anyone else.
Yeah.
And with the way, Malbs he did play star roles before, but that was way back in M80, and it was the setup and the arrangement is so different because he was like you're almost saying, he's like a floating star. He wasn't necessarily playing anchor spots, but then sometimes he'd just be like, I'm gonna bait you guys on A, and I'm gonna hide firebox. Not too dissimilar to someone like Heavy God sometimes does or has done on Cloud9, for example. But he'll just change up his position and be like, I think they're gonna go this way this round, and just effectively gamble, and he'd make a lot of good calls, I think. So it's strange to see him nestle into I guess more traditional star roles where he's not as fluid and he's not calling as much, or maybe that those decisions were actually being made for him. I don't know. But he's a bit more of a static star than one that can be a bit more free flowing. So that's maybe something that will change under Hunter. I don't know, but I just don't anticipate this will be. It might work, but I don't expect it to work out of the gate here for G2. So It's why I have my position as a short instead.
Yeah, fair enough. For me, the important part is still Saw, though. Hunter calling, don't really care. It's what Saw's going to change.
This is the first in-game leader that Soul's working with that isn't a someone that has been an in-game leader.
True, though he has made it work with a like a kid, basically, in Linus to a pretty high level. So I do think there's
Sure.
enough to believe in. There's enough to believe in. But yeah, we'll see how that pans out, because I think this is one of the rosters that's going to be the most boom or bust, given already the players that are there being relatively explosive, as well as the changes they're making, potentially reshaping how the entire squad looks. I think that's the biggest boom or bust pick that we have, and that's probably why we've ended up in very different directions on them. But yeah, let me just update the... there's your G2. And there's that little short. Yeah, there's that little S.
Yeah.
Right. Speaking of... yeah, you've got an interesting team left. Do you want to fill out yours, or do you want to try and fill out mine a bit? So I've got 3 blanks just lying around.
Yeah,
here.
nah, you go.
Okay, because I don't have a special graphic for this team. I took Johnny Speeds. I've taken some risks this month, but I feel like some of the risks I took last month didn't end up biting me in the arse enough, so I can really push the boat out. Johnny Speeds currently don't have a 5th. They just kicked their IGL. And they pretty much did it, according to him, without warning. Just like that, one day to the next, got rid of him. They're a team who's led emotionally, spiritually by Draken, but Shine was tactically the actual IGL. He was officially the leader in that sense. But a lot of what makes this team tick is Draken's AWPing and his sort of like connection that he has with some of the players. I know for a fact that Malo9 is in this team because he pugged with Draken. Like, that's kind of how this roster seems to have built itself up. And they've been probably Metasport have had better, big, flashier results.
Sure.
But overall, week in, week out, month in, month out, Johnny Speeds are reliably the best Swedish team. It feels weird to say that, but Metasport have been so all over the shop, and they're also going through wholesale changes, it seems. This is probably the best Swedish team. And they're going to be playing in the Swedish Elite Series starting tomorrow, I believe. Or is that today?
Tomorrow.
No, that is tomorrow. I don't know why there's no date attached to that. It's game listing. It just says 2 o'clock. I thought that was today, but that's an hour ago. But yeah, they are going to be playing in the Elite Series. I expect them to win it, hence why I've taken them. They're a dividend attempt, really. And given their Valve ranking down at 58, I think there's a good chance they improve that as well.
So I almost picked Johnny Speeds this week as well. But I saw that a Swedish event they're going to is unranked, actually. So
I don't mind the event being unranked as long as they win it. It's a LAN win. They may not change in ranking from that, but I'm expecting them to do well. Even with this blank in their 5th. Chiquinho's currently filling, but yeah.
Yeah, they're just a little bit far down the ranking to always warrant invites to a lot of these online competitions. And so I think that's where some of the obscurity of Johnny Speeds comes from, but the fact they're playing in basically every local Swedish LAN that crops up does actually kind of keep their name circulating around them, as well as Draken randomly posting tweets that seem to get the community enraged, or, talking about his, bringing up the times on an IP or mismanagement of other Swedish organizations, for example. It keeps their name in the spotlight, at least. So they've got some relevance to the public eye. I do think Draken is, surprisingly to me, actually still pretty good. Like he is definitely the best piece on this roster, which is strange to me to say in the year of our Lord 2025, but he's still good, and he's actually, he's not the same Draken as he used to be. Like, I actually see him play positionally a lot smarter than he used to. He still makes a couple of, over aggressive peaks, but he's, you can't take the dog out of the fight, so to speak. This team is interesting from a potential's point of view, and maybe I should believe in them, but it just feels wrong to right now. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Like, the fact that there is this roster instability, and the fact that most of the time I see them play, they are just kind of dumpstering local Swedish teams and mixes.
Yeah, no, they do farm some low-level events. That's going to be, honestly, a part of the appeal. Because I can't say no to that sort of dividend payout over and over again. Yeah, they have struggled for consistency over the last sort of 3 months or so. They've taken losses to teams I consider beneath them, including Swedish teams. But even then, teams like Ecstatic, which I thought not necessarily beneath them, but a team they should be able to beat. They've dropped a map to Phantom.
Who?
Exactly. Just waiting for that reaction. It's Shane's current team with a bunch of, like Izako Boars type legends.
Yeah, okay. I recognize some of the names on them now. Yeah.
It's not exactly elite stuff, but yeah, look, they have the Swedish Wonder Kid in Melo 9. Sapek's actually been playing from far better CS with them than he ever did on some of the other Swedish nightmares that they call teams. So I think this is a team with a lot of potential, and whoever the fifth ends up being, the core piece of this roster that make it tick still exists. So I think they'll be fine. I think they'll be strong. And yeah, hopefully they can pick up a couple of those cheeky LAN wins just for me.
I guess I'll go with one of the more, I guess, roguer picks, but not unlike me to pick them. I'm going with Game Time and Parivision. I think there was definitely a lot of hype circulating with Parivision moving into the major cycle and whether or not they could actually kind of accrue enough points to make it through. I think they've had a couple of failings though, which I think is the major disappointment for Parivision. They are a good team, I think is the biggest thing. Whether or not you're looking at Jame or Cielo as this I guess Jame sort of more redemption arc, but Cielo as this player that not a lot of people would have known too much about prior to his addition on Parivision, but basically a key piece on Gun 5 and their rise. Them being also carried by... Wait, sorry, I had this looked up earlier. What is it? The Belchinook, the heavy lift tandem rotor helicopter, does mean that this Parivision has chances to rise through the ranks by virtue of that three-piece combo.
Jesus. Yeah, they've assembled one hell of a rifling core. And in classic Jame Dastan fashion, they've taken players with seemingly insane role overlap and decided, we'll make it work anyway. They already had that problem when they had just Belchinook and Nota. Then they're like, you know what we need? Another aggressive star rifler. Cielo, please, come over here. It didn't really make a lot of sense initially when I saw it. Then I remembered, this is Jame. He just takes talented pieces and kind of forces them to play how he wants them to. I mean, it's not really his team. It's Kick at IGLing, but we all know it's the same school of thought.
It's a conference, I'm sure, between those three.
Yeah, they've been on the same page for enough time. It won them a major. They're going to keep doing it the same sort of way. And I did like the Cielo edition once I thought it through. Like, once I put it through like Jame Dastan lens, I was like, oh, now I get it.
I see the vision, yeah.
I see what they're trying to do. It's just smashing talent together. The way they did with sort of Flit, Fame, that kind of period, where it didn't always make the most sense, but they just put the players into the roles, and eventually it worked out. Like, that was kind of their approach.
I think they probably just subscribed to the idea that you are Counter-Strike professionals. You are going to have to learn a different method of play. Like, you don't... Yeah. I have always believed that, like, the reason Counter-Strike is so appealing is that everyone can do anything effectively. Like, I could randomly pick up an AWP one day and try an AWP. Maybe not maybe not hit the same ceiling, but if I know what an AWPer should do in a round, I can at least get like a baseline level output for the team. As an aggressive rifler, surely that's not the most outrageous thing to, quiet yourself down into more traditional rifling roles, or just play a little bit more patient in one or two of the rounds. It's not an outrageous claim.
Yeah, maybe you don't have to be a point man. You can trade. Like, oh wow, goody. Yeah, that's kind of the philosophy here, isn't it?
Maybe that's why Overdrive is tweeting something about Flit wanting to join Parivision. It's like, wait, I got taught how to trade. That's all I want to do now, actually.
Yeah, it could be. But no, yeah, Cielo for me, on Gun 5, post Tanier, a lot of the responsibility fell on him because he already was the aggressive piece on that team when Tanier was there, essentially closing things up, mopping things up. He was like the janitor, right? Cielo makes a mess, Tanier cleans it up. That was sort of how they set themselves up. Post Tanier, he had to do a lot more. Like, there wasn't as good a janitor. Sadime put in some work for a bit, but it wasn't the same. So Gun 5 struggled, but he still shone. Like, if you paid attention, he still hit some crazy shots. He still made them tick as an aggressive piece. On this roster so far, he's not been earth-shattering, but tell you what, he's a far more talented player than Travis. Like, that's who he's replacing, remember. It's not like he's come in for some star piece or some guy who's just got so much tenure and so much wisdom and so many wins that you can't possibly touch him. No, man, it's Travis. Like, it's cool. You can replace him. And they have. I thought, honestly, I was praying this team would do a more roll cell move and pick up Texi, Nota's twin brother, because I thought that'd have been so glorious.
Wait, I don't even know who Texi is.
TEX1Y, Nota's twin brother. It's the same dude in a different jersey. It's their twins.
That's actually crazy.
They both played on Rush B together. And initially on Rush B, when Nota was coming up and Nota gets spotted, Texi was kind of struggling in like these sort of trader closer sort of positions. Semi-star rifler at times, a bit more aggressive CT side, the classic stuff. But then post Nota, there's been a lot more emphasis on him, and they're still playing this style that's very basic at Rush B. But he was thriving, he was hitting a lot of shots. All of a sudden, I'm like, yeah, okay. And the spots where Nota in the past, because on Nota's Rush B was, Nota, you are set up for this opening. Okay, now fucking go AFK until we've actually got the bomb down now, that you've gotten us this opening, and then win the post plant as well, please. Texi's doing that second half of it. Like, Zinni's taken over the opening. Texi's now doing this sort of late round closer position. I thought he'd have been a great addition instead of Travis. They've gone the Ziello route. It's their philosophy, whatever. I thought it'd been pretty fun just to have the twins on the same team. Just like when Adam B and Susp played together. I thought that was pretty fun. But instead, they've gone with a different talent. 7 horrors. I'm sure they'll be good. They just need to get the right invites and the right matches.
Listen, I've seen enough rosters that have had twins on it to know that just doesn't work. They almost
Reserve,
always
the greatest team that has ever played Counter-Strike.
or Immortals, or basically any Henny Lucas pair up disaster.
They kind of tarnish the twin idea with their special breed of mess. Like, I don't know what the hell you call it.
All I'm saying is I never saw as big a things out of Freddy Frog and
Relaxer.
Relaxer as much as I maybe wanted them as well.
They were so good in tier 2.
These duo pair ups, like, just because you're twins, don't mean that you should stay together. Actually,
yeah, but these two are actually both good. I thought that was a good shout, but
then they'll be terrible when they're together. Henny and Lucas were also doing good things separate from each other, kind of.
Hey, they were good in tier 2. As a duo, but no, that's Parivision. I think they're a solid pick. Look, I don't know what events they're going to be playing. They're currently got nothing going on over the course of the summer, but they're approaching invite range. They're at 42 right now.
Yeah,
on the Valve ranking. We'll see where they come out the other end. I think they've got upward potential basically just in terms of these pieces.
The important thing for me was that, like, moving into the major, I was very excited for the prospect of them breaking through because I love the idea of a comeback story. I liked the idea of Nafany with Bet Boom, for example. I like the idea of Jame with Parivision sort of clawing back with that core as well, with Dastan and Kickert. So for me, I just had to sort of catch myself and think, wait, I was excited for Parivision prior to the major, and now we haven't actually been able to talk about them for a little bit of time because they just haven't been playing as much, and then the major's going on. I just had to remind myself almost that they exist and that they are still a team that are, they are a threat effectively within that tier 2 circuit.
Okay. Yeah. No, solid pick. A solid pick. I've got another risk here. Another, not necessarily that big a risk. Another cheeky little deep pull. I've taken Eternal Fire.
This one surprised me.
So there's literally one reason. Well, there's a couple, but there's one literal reason. BTC Turk Game Fest 2025 finals is coming up June 27th.
Of course,
where they will be playing against the Bushido Wildcats. Now, if they don't win this game, I will throw a brick at like a window or something. I don't know whose window, but a window. They should smash them. Look, they've got Calix and imoRR, two players people will recognize. M-Star, if you paid attention to the Academy system for a while, he was always there at Tunnel Fire Academy. And then JREZ, Jersey, and Luxon. Both Luxon and Jersey both came from the same Turkish side to this team, but Jersey, I think I'm going to call him, was actually on a Tunnel Fire Academy way back. He had a couple little stints. But yeah, from Pacific comes those two players to fill in. And honestly, they don't play great CS. Just to be very clear, they don't play great CS. They are an imoRR and Calix-led side. What did you expect?
But this is also an unranked event.
It's an unranked event. Also... But guess what? They're going to fucking win it. They're going to win it. And that's another dividend payout. I'm aware of the numbers involved.
Wait a second. These
gambling on
should they even
things.
count? Should these even count? Local LAN win dividend payouts. I don't know.
Of course
unranked.
LAN wins. LAN wins are LAN wins. And look, if you look at some of the events they've actually played, they've beaten teams of a okay-ish tier 3 level. Like in advanced, they beat some like tier 3 stars like Cubics and things like that. Like there's clearly something brewing here with enough actual ranked points ranked events as well. They're going to get a Valve ranking pretty soon. I think they're not far off. This is a team that's going to, I think, take that very easy leap from like the low 100s, maybe like 170, 180, potentially even 200 down, up into the, you know, tier 3 edges, like 120, 110, that sort of zone. I think it's an opportunity to take some points there. Plus, they're going to play those Turkish lands. Now, they might get arrested when they arrive, imoRR, but as long as they can finish them and win them, we'll be okay. So that's kind of my reasoning for them. It's a risky pick, just in terms of if they ever even get ranked, because they never get ranked. I'm never going to see any real points from that side of things, because the moment they do get ranked, I think they give me like 40, like basically straight off the bat.
If imoRR gets arrested, that has to be like a minus 25 dividend or something, bro.
Okay. Technically he has been, or at least there's
an
rumors.
Investigation or something. Yeah.
I'll give you this. I'll take a 15-point deduction if imoRR actually ends up in cuffs.
Okay, because that would be this would be a crazy pull. Like,
I'll do it.
The idea, it's like, oh yeah, it should be a gimme against Bushido Wildcats. Actually, imoRR's in cuffs. They're playing 4v5.
And if they still win, though, I'll take those 10 points.
Yeah, that'd be fair.
The 15 deduction and the plus 10. It's only minus 5 if they can win that 4v5. I mean, they've already beaten Bushido Wildcats in like the last sort of 2-3 months. In advanced, I think it was. Yeah. So there's a matchup. There's a matchup they should win.
Yeah, because the coach that they have, El Principe, is not a player. Like he's a career coach, from my understanding. So
he was involved in the Academy project, wasn't he? Yeah. He was the Academy coach for a while. I mean, he's not got a HLTV player profile, but I'm sure he's played in some low level.
Sure, of course.
Thing, And that's often the case whenever you look up a player and you're like, oh, he's got no team experience, and you look him up on Wikipedia and it's like Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Oh shit! Even though he's Wikipedia, he's only a manager or a coach. He doesn't even have anything that relevant. Interesting.
Yeah, but he must have a hell of a mind for the game.
I mean, he must know enough.
Yeah. I mean, you have to have the respect for the players, to be honest, right? Like,
to have been around this long. So hopefully, I mean, they're currently ranked in terms of HLTV ranking as 84th. If they get VRS ranked and even come close to that, they'll be worth a lot of points. So that's why I think this team is a worthy pickup.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's just a few. If there were more recognizable faces on this team, and maybe this is like a very old head way of looking at the roster, but seeing Calix and imoRR as like the best pieces on the roster doesn't fill me with a ton of confidence. So I can understand though, as for an angle, if they're going to get enough VRS points, then they are naturally going to shoot up. So
yeah, and look out for Jersey. He's put up some decent numbers here and there. Like nothing spectacular, not too many big names, but he's doing something. He's doing a little something. And
Sure.
Turkey's always been rich with mechanical talent, so I'm excited to see what they do.
Yeah, not too dissimilar to players like xFloud, for example, or God, there was another one that I was really pumped for, and then he got dropped by Sangal.
By Sangal. Oh, you mean the guy? He's now on Fireflux, right?
Yes.
I've got his picture in my head.
I'm just gonna find him.
He's on Fireflux.
Soulfly.
That's it.
Yeah, Soulfly was the other guy.
Soulfly's still putting up absolute numbers on Fireflux, by the way.
Yeah, I still maintain he probably should have gotten a chance, but nobody gave it to him.
He could play on this Eternal Fire team if he wanted, but or if they offered.
Yeah, Fireflux are doing pretty good actually.
Yeah.
So wouldn't have been a terrible idea for us either. But we didn't go that direction. So
No. Decided to go some different cheese. But yeah, let's I've got one more pick. And this one's interesting. This is a short position on Spirit Academy. Dun dun dun. Yeah, this is for a combination of reasons. Firstly, obviously, Kyosuke confirmed 2 Falcons does mean that this team looks, on paper, a lot less appealing. Now, those of you who've done like me and actually watched them play, you'll know there's more than just one talented player on this roster. And for me, that's why I believe, firstly, that this Academy project will continue to exist. If they just get deleted from the rankings entirely, I'm not sure I can really take any real victory from that. But I do believe they're going to stick around. There is rumor that at least that probably one piece could be involved in the next Spirit iteration. The idea being Mokujin potentially going up. I actually think that's a pretty astute signing if you're Spirit, because Mokujin is surprisingly sharp and also not as antsy as some of the other players on this team. They do have a problem with sitting still in between Kyosuke, Alkaren, to a certain extent Robo as well. Their IGL just has a tendency to go and make plays and put himself into fragging positions just mid-round. He's like, okay, I'm going to be here and fight till death. And you're like, why? It sometimes works. That's the most frustrating part. But yeah, I expect this team to be sort of taken apart and then have to fill in from the younger rosters. Players who are less experienced, players who are going to struggle a bit. And I expect them to take a big hit. They've already started slipping in the rankings. I'm assuming some distractions off the server not helping them out. Losing some series that they typically would find pretty winnable. So now they're down to 38 in VRS. I expect that to take a bigger hit. So that's why I've taken this short position. I could be proven wrong. They could have done it again. They could have found another absolutely bonkers talent down in tier 3, 4, 5, face it, wherever the hell it is they even scout players anymore. And just, they stick him in and it all works. But for me, this Spirit Academy team looks like they might lose another player. I don't know if the replacements are going to be up to snuff. I think they're going to take a hit and probably lose a good 15, 20 points in a best case scenario. Worst case, they go down way more, in which case, yeah, I look like a genius.
Yeah, I know we've discussed Spirit Academy before, and just the idea that selling Kyosuke is one thing, that could have also been technically an upgrade or something that they could have considered for the main roster, but without that, with Kyosuke leaving, it always became a question, is it actually a better idea for Spirit Academy or Navi Junior to actually sell the core to another organization that's looking to get invites or looking to get into the counterstrike circuit? Because you can't necessarily sort of quote unquote buy your way into majors anymore. You have to have a team that can float around that top 30 position where you are getting a lot of these invites to big events, and you can hopefully maintain that by the time the major comes around. Spirit Academy being as high up in the ranks as they are, and sure, they, like you said, they've sort of deteriorated a little bit, but that is still a valuable VRS position to have. And like you said, the team itself is not without talent in the absence of Kyosuke.
Yeah.
So I think there is merit to that. I guess I worry that Spirit may just discard the rest of the pieces. Like after, Mokujin might be worth selling, Alkarin might be worth selling, but I think, support players, IGLs, they're a little bit harder to market when there was always not even a glass ceiling above them, like a concrete one, in that they could never actually compete against some of the big dogs because Spirit were themselves attending a lot of these events. So there's no provability for a support player or an anchor player to actually transition those skills into tier 1, which is the hardest part. That and Spirit just seem to have branched out to their own academy circuit where they've got 3 already listed teams. We were talking about this earlier, before we went live, and they've got 2 under 16, 2 under 14, and under 12 squad planned as some sort of blueprint. So maybe they're not able to find, talents within Faceit or however they were doing scouting before. Maybe they are just casting a wide net now and just saying, hey, we've actually signed all of the players that are interesting within the age range of 12 to 18. It's strange, but that might be a more profitable model instead of trying to keep the Spirit Academy team afloat where it is. So I would actually hesitate to approach this team because I do wonder whether it will just explode afterwards.
Well, that's kind of what I'm gambling on here. I don't think it'll fully explode. I just think there's maybe one piece more going away. So they maintain a core, promote some more kids. Because they do have Kyosuke was, 16, 17? The oldest player on this roster might be, I think, Robo, who's 19. Still incredibly young. There's still a lot of time you can wait before you have to worry about these kids being even done with school, let alone, that appealing to pick up. And when you look on the surface, you just look at the stats, you just pure stats, no other thinking. This year, and for most of the roster's tenure has been roughly the same. It's Kyosuke at a 1.3. Everyone else, 110 I think is the peak you'll see out of Alcaren, 106 from Mokujin. Nothing spectacular out of Robo and Cypher. You pay attention to the way they play, and then you also just filter by LAN results, and you're like, holy fuck. All of a sudden, this looks like a star-studded super team. And especially when you watch POVs, you'll see games where Cypher hits absurd highlights. Mokujin's winning clutches. The untapped potential is there. If you're paying enough attention, you'll see there's a lot of untapped potential. But it's just about who wants to take that risk. I don't think enough teams would want to take that risk on kids. So I think they're going to have this roster still. They're just going to have less talented pieces filling in the gaps, which will lead to a bit of a decay.
I've just been in the circuit long enough, and you and I will both know this, that even if a player looks good eye test wise, they don't necessarily always get opportunities. They could make a lot of good choices. They could have, good rounds. You see mechanical potential, but on the surface of it, a lot of teams and players do filter by stats first, and then they find, they'll look for stats and then see if they can look at a demo and see whether or not they're getting the stats the right ways. But they won't look at players that are low on stats pages usually and go, I'm actually going to see whether or not this guy is doing a lot of the right things and whether or not we can improve him, whether or not there's potential there. There's very few teams that have ever expressed an interest in doing that. I guess, Gamer Legion is maybe one, but even then they seem to have picked up players that have traditionally held quite high statistics.
Their Towson pickup's the one exception, basically, because Towson's numbers were never spectacular, but Ash saw something.
Yeah, maybe Buzz to Astralis, but even then he was kind of actually no, he was kind of carrying from the front on that old Ecstatic team, or is it Masonic? It would have been Masonic, I think. Yeah. So there's just been very few pieces that have ever broken through without having crazy stats or being. People are less willing to take a risk on it, basically, unless they've got good stats to back it up. Even if those players are mechanically, structurally very sound, which is why a lot of people always want to be the star player, because it's probably the quote-unquote fastest track to get into the Tier 1 circuit, even if it is harder to sustain.
Yeah. We'll see. I think this is going to be one of the more interesting teams to follow over the course of this roster mania.
For sure.
With teams making moves. We just had a HLTV also rumor, leak/announce Spirit targeting Zwei. So unlikely Mokujin makes the move up to them. But hey, maybe someone wants to take a risk on an Orpa. Maybe someone wants Alcaren. He's got insane land stats this year. Really impressive stats. You watch the demos, I'm going to be honest, he's sometimes a bit of a mess. But he certainly hits the shots. He's got that ability. He's a shot maker. Even if he is a little gung-ho with his own life at times, which I'm sure some people are not going to be big fans of. But yeah, my prediction, Spirit take a bit of a dip. Oh, the Academy, rather. We'll see what comes of it. That's all our picks, though. A couple short positions.
Did we mention my Astralis pick, or did that just kind of like... Okay.
They're a hold. We can get into the extras. I'm just talking about we filled up the actual picks and big stat screens. That's our picks for this episode. Like the short positions, I think are going to be interesting because we had way more shorts last time. Mostly from me. I had 3. I've been a bit more optimistic this week, or this month rather, especially on G2 side. But yeah, we do have a couple holds that might be worth addressing because we've both held Spirit and Falcons. You've held onto Astralis. We haven't touched on any of these. I think we'll start with the Astralis one. They've signed Hooksy. I think that's the big green flag that has led to this decision from you. How optimistic are you, though, beyond that point? Do you think this is Hooksy stays, we keep playing good CS, we see the best out of Yabi and Stown, or is this eventually we need to look at other Danish players type roster?
This is, if Yabi and Stown don't turn the ship around under Hooksy, then they may just axe those 2 players. Genuinely, I do worry about that duo because they are supposed to be a primetime Danish powerhouse duo that just haven't been able to find consistency in the slightest. Whether or not that's, under Cadian for a little bit, there were glimpses and like maybe a week or 2 periods where you're thinking, oh, maybe they're back actually. Stown and Yabi are actually kind of undervalued.
Yeah.
But the piece that has elevated in all the chaos, to be honest, and one that's kind of captured my heart, maybe a bit of a soft spot, is Stare, actually. Like I look at Stare on this team as the best rifler that's currently on Astralis, which is strange to think about considering the accomplishments that Stown and Yabi both respectively have, but Stare is not only sharp, but he makes, I'd say, a lot of excellent decisions. I think there's a couple times I see him in clutches where he does make the wrong move, or he just gets a bit giddy, but he's still, I think, settling into that role, but it's something that he's excelling. I guess that the sort of mid-round up until the late stage is where he's excelling at the moment, and he's someone that's, I think, going to provide a lot of that extra firepower that is sometimes absent from that rifling pair. So that with Hooksy, I think it should look good. I think Devices looked more comfortable in the very brief outing that they had with Hooksy at Astana. I have very high hopes for Astralis, and it's something that I believed in before. And again, I had to sort of remind myself of their existence and moving into this next calendar or next season of the circuit, that they can make it into the major via the ranking cutoff, just based on the way that I think they're going to play for these big events.
Yeah, the Stare activation has been really fun to see. Like, Hooksy coming in is just, he's just better at being the traditional support IGL than the IGLs they've had in the past, in terms of especially dying for a trader. Like, and Stare's been that guy trading off of Hooksy's deaths a lot. Yabi's been the problem, really. Like, in terms of the Yabi-Stown duo, Stown puts up his numbers. And
sure.
In the last event, the problem they played with Hooksy, he did that all the way through pretty much. Like, you couldn't really complain about Stown. You couldn't call him, like, you didn't say he choked this one away. You couldn't really denigrate him in that sense. He was just strong. So between Stown, Stare as your rifling, like, kind of featured star duo, Device not being insanely good, but good, and having a solid caller, I think, yeah, this Astralis team is legitimately one to be reckoned with. Talks about whether or not they'll make a change, potentially. I think that'll give Yabi another sort of month or so.
Get up the ass, basically, but...
Yeah, be like, yeah, you need to be better, but we'll give you a chance to prove that. That's going to be afforded to him, but overall, this is still a strong roster, right? This is still a roster that should be contending for playoffs at events, should be aiming for playoffs at big events, especially. Whether or not they make it's different because the field is quite dense with strong-ish teams in that sort of range, but certainly is a massive turnaround to have finally done what everyone fucking told them to do, get Hooksy in and all of a sudden start playing good CS. What a shocker, but it will be effective, even if it is a bit late. It's a bit later to finally come to this, but yeah, they should be solid. They should be invited to Fisher. if the right teams reject Fisher, they might even have a chance of making a deep run there. That'll immediately pay off hugely. I think their current position in the VRS is fairly movable.
I think they're 12th. At the
12th,
moment.
yeah. So it'll be tough to make a massive jump, but it's at least, there's room to grow. There's teams to overtake in that range. But yeah, interesting hold. I don't think they'll be too dramatic, though, compared to some of these other rosters we've talked about.
I think it's also fair that, what is it, like a 6-month window that points degrade? There are some teams that are, I think, slightly above.
Yeah.
That actually should slide a bit. I think G2 are definitely one. Gamer Legion are another. So I think there's some movement that can happen even without Astralis competing, funnily enough. But
yeah,
we'll have to see. I just have hopes for that team because it's been a while since I've hoped for Astralis at all, actually. And I would like to see Device and Stare do well. Those are the two pieces that I guess I have a soft spot for on the roster. And yes, I'm putting my faith in Hooksy to make that work. And I don't necessarily have a soft spot for him, but he's a good caller most of the time.
Yeah, I've never had any particular animosity for Hooksy. I'm going to be honest. I really liked the way his Copenhagen Flames team played. I've liked some of the things he's done with this team already. I just think G2 was not a good place for any IGL, let alone one that actually tried to IGL. So, yeah.
I think that's
best of both worlds.
I think it's reasonable, but I also think people give Hooksy almost too much credit for G2's successes, but then also recognize that he probably wasn't a good fit as well. Like, I see this duality of people where they're like, oh yeah, Hooksy wasn't actually that great of a player, but it called pretty well, and they won some trophies, which I can't discredit. I don't feel I have an animosity towards Hooksy either. I just think that there's a little bit of I dislike the conversations around in-game leaders where we give them a lot of benefit of the doubt and then we don't acknowledge the bad things, because there were definitely still a lot of bad things with the Hooksy G2. Like, every game was close. Every game was a ball buster on T sides, for example. Like, his T sides were put together, but then also very frequently thrust into chaos, a little too frequently for my eyes. So
the timing used to fall apart. Essentially, like,
yes,
when you actually needed to deliver the strike of the spear, like, everything just all of a sudden lacked coordination. It was like, oh, what? Oh, you went? Oh, there's no trading? Okay, we need to recover this now. Like, yeah,
and sometimes it was Hooksy that was causing the problems.
Yeah. Sometimes it was just Hooksy. Like, that was a part of the problem. But it's just...
So I do just see a lot of people fail to recognize that, like, there were definitely still issues for calling wise for G2. In fact, a lot of the people were calling for his head because the calling was so inconsistent for G2 for a long period. And then when he left and then Snacks comes in, everyone's like, oh, well, it's so much worse. It was about the same. I'm going to be honest. It was about the same. Maybe you'd see less of, like, the well put together, like, structured executes like you'd see with Hooksy, but the output, like the general output, was actually fairly similar. You just maybe see it fall apart in later stages of games.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my rant.
Yeah, I mean, that's always with G2. Comparing IGLs gets annoying and confusing because, of course, they can't just change one player. They always have to fucking add something else into the mix. It was like,
yep, and always
so
things are rose-tinted glasses when things break. In the next version, again, it's like, oh wait, can we go back again?
Yeah,
actually,
bring him back.
The nostalgia was pretty good.
But yeah, I think we should touch on Falcons before we leave, because every other conversation I'm going to have for the next month is going to be Spirit. I don't want to have another one. But
yeah,
Falcons, well, we're holding them. They've just signed Kyosuke for Magix. The roles seem a bit skew with. You have concerns / a death wish for them, I guess. Like, how realistic do you think it is that Falcons struggle with this roster?
It's not that I think they'll struggle.
You just don't think they're going to beat anyone. Like, you don't think they're going to be world beaters.
Yes, I simply think Kyosuke is simply not going to be the person people want him to be. Like, he just simply won't be. He won't be Donk V2. He won't be like, if anything, he could be, he could be a Yakindar on Furia. But I actually don't know that I see him exceeding that output as consistently as Donk does, I am fully anticipating this Kyosuke move and all the hype and the millions of dollars that they've spent on him to actually undervalue his production. Like, I would have much rather seen him naturally develop over time and, be able to make that jump into tier 1. Donk is an anomaly. We have to remember that Donk is an anomaly in terms of making it to the tier 1 circuit and basically blowing everyone out of the water. We cannot expect Kyosuke to be the same, and yet we are latching onto it like he will be the second coming of Christ in CS2, and I just don't see it happening. But it will still be an upgrade. I think it's the important part that I have to include there. But again, like you're saying, the rules are going to be strange, and everyone's going to have to shift around a bit. And the HLTV did an article on it. We talked about it earlier, but Tessus is probably going to get the short straw.
It feels like this isn't a one-player move, right? This feels like such a strange one-for-one to have made in the first place. Like, the fact that you're going minus Magus plus Kyosuke just straight up feels odd, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that just doesn't seem like the change that should have happened. In much the same way, to a less extreme extent, but still a similar idea, with Ziello coming in for Travis on Parivision. Like, this is just not the one-for-one you expected. You're going to have to readjust everything again. And whilst Tess says, I think Tess could just be in the roles, it's a very different thing to thriving in certain positions and being like effective, impactful, and also vocal in the way that Magic's. He wasn't fragging out that crazily well, but he at least knew how to play his position. And if someone rotates into his bomb site, if someone needs something from him, he knows how to do it in those moments. Let's see if Tessus can match it. I mean, he's never been a true star on a team, like not since he was playing in Danish rosters most people have never heard of. He's always been a sort of a role player, like even back on Heroic. Like, that wasn't him an outright star. But this is different. You're full on a support now. You have to play hard anchors. There is very limited option for you to get active, get your numbers, get your frags, the fights you want to take. It is going to be very hard for him. So for me, Falcons are one move short of being the Vitality wreckers that they want to be. But they've added a player who I think his peak is near Donk's. Unfortunately, I think his realistic level, I think Yakindar's not a bad analysis, not a bad shout in terms of what the number's going to look like on paper afterwards. But it's going to be way different. Like, I think a ridiculous impact stat, decent KPR, all that stuff's probably going to happen, but it's not going to look the way Yakindar's looks. Like, it's going to be far messier. Which is weird to say, considering Yakindar's not famous for always the cleanest looking CS, but Kyosuke does not play a very pretty, controlled style of Counter-Strike.
It's just interesting that, to me, Kyosuke and Donk obviously have a lot of similarities, but he's somewhere between Zontix and Donk in terms of like what choices he makes. Because there are some rounds where he actually doesn't go like super headstrong. I'd even say he's probably a little bit more methodical. Like, if I have to compare Kyosuke now to Donk when he first broke into tier 1, like, Kyosuke is a better player in terms of like his methodology, his temperament. He's not as headstrong as Donk was when he first broke into tier 1. Like, Donk would overlook angles, he would fully just beeline hard strafe everywhere. Kyosuke, I think, is a little bit more. There's more trained clearing, I think, with the way that he plays. And so, in a way, I'd always sort of seen him as like not better. Donk sounds wrong, but I guess like there's more of a method to the madness than Donk. I think Donk is a mechanics phenom, and sure, he obviously understands the game, he understands the methodology. He just breaks it very frequently. Kyosuke felt like he learned a lot more. He was like a learned talent, I guess, more so than Donk was. I almost wish, and I still wish, that he would get a chance on Spirit and develop that way instead. and maybe a couple years down into his career, then make a move to, a big super team or something along those lines. I just don't think that they're going to give him. First off, there's going to be a lot more pressure on him to perform at this level, but they are not. I just don't anticipate they're going to set him up quite properly. I think Zonic, Kixan, everyone will ask him what does he need to feel comfortable, and I don't know that Kyosuke would be able to articulate that in a way that would be accommodated, perhaps.
Yeah, he's a player who, and he's, in terms of how I see him, I really struggle to see him doing things that are truly within structure, that require, like, the way you've described the way he, like, maybe checks things, clears angles, yeah, maybe more methodical than Donk, but I've watched him need to sit on a bomb site for 30 seconds, and he physically couldn't. He just couldn't sit still. Like, he had to kind of, maybe I'll go forward towards that, and maybe now I'll come back, and now I'm going to jiggle around this thing for a bit, because I want to, please, someone peek me! Like, he doesn't ever sit still, and
sure.
I think that for him, what's going to allow him to be his best self is kind of the right to do whatever the fuck he wants. The problem is he's playing on a team with multiple players who have that right already. There's only so many people who get to do that, so I think that's where he's going to struggle. And then obviously comms up to snuff in English. I don't care that he spoke English decently well in an interview. When 3 guns are firing in his ears and 2 different people are saying different things, and he needs to interpret what relates to him and then communicate correctly back to them and frag and position of it's a different thing entirely. So we'll see how he handles that transition as well. I think that could be one of the struggles, but I do think it's going to be a scrappy Falcons team who'll have the ceiling to go win everything, but will have a floor of top 8. We lost 2-0 to a team who actually just played around us, like,
Sure.
execed around us, anticipated our pushes a little better, like,
or bottling at the major, for example.
Or they'll just bottle at the major. Yeah, but that's a Nico special right there. Like, just when he looked like he could win it. Just when he looked like he could win it, goes out in fucking groups, of course.
Yeah, doesn't make it to playoffs.
The classic, but yeah,
doesn't get close.
Yeah, we'll see how Falcons hold up. I mean, I don't think they'll take too much of a dip. That's why I think we're both holding them. If we expected a massive dip, obviously we would have addressed that. But yeah, easy hold on Falcons. At worst,
it's hard to
point.
It's hard to deny that they've just got some of the highest firepower of any team in the circuit right now.
Yeah, that firepower is a dividend waiting to happen, right? Like, just a big event, just a one-off, they'll just win it.
Yep.
But yeah, that's the portfolio update, really. Big W for me in the last month. This month, not too many events to really screw me over, so I think that's why some of my riskier moves are going to be okay. Like, especially the tricked hold. We'll see. We'll have to address that in a month's time, see if it's still worth it. But yeah, some of these tier 1 teams going through some changes might be going through more changes over the course of the summer. That might factor into the next episode of this. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, leave a comment telling me your thoughts on any of these picks, who you'd have taken, who do you think there's value in going into this summer break, and of course, sub for more content. Thank you to SkinClub.
Also, let us know if you think imoRR's going to get arrested at this Turkish land.
Yeah, that'll be funny. But yeah, thanks to SkinClub for hosting this show, putting it on, allowing us to trade our stocks, and we'll see you next month. Goodbye.